Could a former Kevin Stefanski and Mike McCarthy understudy find his home in Seattle as the new offensive coordinator? What's going on, everybody? Good Sunday morning. 3 playoff games coming up later today. Should be interesting. I imagine a lot of you guys will be checking that out. But the show goes on for the Seattle Seahawks. They may not be playing this weekend, but they have things to think about this weekend, like who is the next offensive coordinator going to be? And we've already looked at several interesting candidates, and today we're going to look at 2 more. So this first video is going to be taking a look at this particular candidate. Keep an eye out for another video looking at another candidate later today. So this one is a little bit older than most of the candidates we've looked at so far. And quite frankly, the resume is not going to be blowing anybody away. I'm just going to go ahead and say that right now. Alex Van Pelt is, I would almost go as far as to say, the unluckiest man in football over the last couple of decades. And that sounds like maybe a little bit of a cop-out, but really, this guy can't catch a break. He cannot land in a favorable situation to save his life. And he keeps getting hired, he keeps getting jobs, he keeps getting work. So you know that people out there think highly of him, but he cannot find a place to really put his roots down and experience particularly great success. There was a short stint in Green Bay many years ago, but other than that, he just hasn't been able to find a home. And maybe Seattle will be his home, but let's take a look at the resume here for Alex Van Pelt and understand what we're getting into here if we hired him. So 54 years old, and the most recent season in the NFL, and this is something that I think might be appealing to some Seahawks fans, myself included, he has called plays before. He called plays this season. I guess I should say this season. Season's still going. 2024, he was the play caller for the New England Patriots. So you know he can do it. Now, can he do it well? Jury's out on that. Because in 2024, it was bad. Patriots scored 17 points per game, 30th in the league, negative .081 EPA per play, 27th in the league. One of the worst offenses in football. But let's think about what he had to work with here. Think about what he was dealing with on that team, what he was dealing with in terms of a head coach, and keep that in mind as we go forward here. So before then, and this is one of his extended stays, he was the offensive coordinator / quarterback coach under Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. For the Cleveland Browns from 2020 to 2023, he was both the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach. Now, obviously in Cleveland, you're not calling plays. Stefanski is going to be the guy who's running the show there. So understand that he's not necessarily somebody that we can look at and go, hey, the results here are meaningful in that he can be a good play caller in this league. We don't know that based off of this. But he did wear multiple hats. And that other hat that he wore, the quarterback coach one, I mean, you got to feel for the guy with the stuff he had to deal with this season. Or this during this stint, I should say. It wasn't just one season. Like 2023, the last year before he got, he moved on. And I want to say, whatever you want to say about what he did in Cleveland, this was kind of a promotion. He got to go to a place where he got to call plays. So it is worth noting that for whatever we can say about these results, people out there think highly of this guy. He keeps moving up in the world, even though the results don't totally bear it out. 2023, the Cleveland Browns did have a top 10 offense in points, 10th in the league, 23.3, but they had one of the worst EPA per play scores in the league, negative .127, 28th. Remember how good the Browns defense was in 2023. It was the best in the league, and they were scoring a lot of points based off of that. So I don't think you can give a lot of credit to the offense for how much they scored. And you look at the quarterbacks that he had to work with this season. There were 5 different quarterbacks that made a start this year, or So of the four that actually played significantly, you had Deshaun Watson having a pretty bad year. 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, 4 picks, 61% completion. Joe Flacco came in and actually played admirably, 90 QB rating, 1,600 yards, 13 touchdowns, but you certainly wouldn't say he played good. You got PJ Walker, 700 yards, 5 picks, 1 touchdown, less than 50% completion, pretty bad. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 440 yards, 1 touchdown, 53.6. It is a buffet of poor quarterback play, but I think we can all look at this and agree it's not just poor quarterback play, it's poor quarterbacks. We all know what Deshaun Watson's been doing since he got traded to Cleveland. Joe Flacco was very, very old when he went to Cleveland last year, and PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson just don't have much gas, so you're not really working with a lot that people would be envious of. So the results are not good, but they're understandable. You go back to 2022, the Cleveland offense was about average, 18th in the league, 21.2 points per game. And the EPA was actually positive, barely, 0.013, 12th in the league. That's okay. Jacoby Brissett was manageable, 2,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 picks, 64%. That's okay. Deshaun Watson came back at the end of the year and played pretty poorly. 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, 58.2 completion, 79.1 QB rating. So you can't really say Deshaun Watson was good either. I mean, I don't think I need to convince anybody that Deshaun Watson has been a completely different quarterback since arriving in Cleveland. He's not good anymore. 2021, the offense was a little below average, 20.5 points per game, 0.014 EPA, 18th, so positive EPA, but barely. And you had two quarterbacks, mostly Baker Mayfield. He was okay, 3,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, 60.5 completion. I mean, it was a disappointment for sure. And Case Keenum gave you about 460 yards, 3 touchdowns, 91.3. I guess that's decent. Didn't play a lot, but okay. You could do worse with the Case Keenum. And then you've got 2020. This was the year the Browns won a playoff game, and their offense was pretty decent. 14th in points, top 10 in EPA per play, 0.019, 091, excuse me. And Baker Mayfield had a really good year. 3,600 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 picks, 96 QB rating. So that was the year that kind of made Cleveland think they actually really had something there. And obviously things fizzled out. But again, you're looking at this stuff. You're looking at what happened in Cleveland, right? So he gets there in 2020 under Stefanski, and things go fairly well. The next year, Baker Mayfield plays through an injury, falls off significantly, and that causes Cleveland to panic and make the monster Deshaun Watson trade. And Deshaun Watson has been a complete waste ever since he got there, just not really providing anything of value, and he hasn't had a real quarterback. And then he goes to New England in a year where they have no offensive line, and they got Jacoby Brissett, who was never great anyway, and now he's pretty much washed up, and you've got rookie Drake May, and you've got no receivers at all. It's like, get this guy a break, man. He can't find a decent situation. And even you go back to before he was with the Browns, he was with the Cincinnati Bengals as the quarterback coach for 2 years, 2018, 2019. He got Andy Dalton after he was already past his prime. Andy Dalton had great years earlier in his career. These were not the better years. Over these 2 years, he gave you about, 6,000 total passing yards, interceptions picked up, and completion percentage down. I guess 2018 was decent, right? But he didn't play the whole season. 21 touchdowns, 11 picks, 62 completion percentage. 2019, significant dip. Really wasn't a good quarterback anymore, and he misses Joe Burrow by 1 year. Joe Burrow was drafted for 2020. So, again, just misses that window where he could have had the good Andy Dalton or Joe Burrow. So then we go back to his previous stint, an extended stint with Green Bay. He actually spent, I think, what was it? Yeah, it was 6 years here. Most recently as a quarterback coach. And he caught Aaron Rodgers as he was slowly starting to kind of ease off into being not the hyper dominant player that he had been. and not in the first 3 years so much, but 2017 was the year when Rodgers got hurt, and when Rodgers was healthy, he just wasn't quite the same. In 2017, Aaron Rodgers gave you about 1,700 yards, 6 touchdowns, 6 picks, 65% completion. Still decent numbers, but then he gets hurt, and you get a lot of Brent Hundley, and he 12 picks. Really not good. Not good. You're not happy with this. 70.6 QB rating. So Brent Hundley goes out there, doesn't give you a lot you like. And the previous 3 years are great, but again, it's one of those things where you could almost associate Alex Van Pelt with the slippage of Aaron Rodgers, because 2014, the first year he was the QB coach, Aaron Rodgers won league MVP and came within a very fluky game of playing in the Super Bowl. It should be yards, by the way. Yeah, so, and I misspelled Rodgers' name. But yeah, all 3 of these years, Rodgers was still good. 40 touchdowns, 7 picks, 38 touchdowns, 5 picks, giving you 4,000 plus yards. Completion percentage was good outside of 2015. 2015, you saw a little bit of a slip, I guess, but 112 QB rating in 2014. But then you get to 2017, and things slip, and he ends up moving on to the Bengals. Again, it's just like he can't find that comfortable situation. He had a decent situation in Green Bay here during this window, but again, it's just one of those things where it didn't even really feel like he got to work with the best of Aaron Rodgers. Like, the best Aaron Rodgers was probably 2011. That was probably the best Aaron Rodgers, and you miss that Aaron Rodgers by a few years. And then you miss the Andy Dalton years, and then you end up in Cleveland when they can't figure out their quarterback situation. You guys see what I'm saying here? Right. Before being the quarterback coach in Green Bay, he spent 2 years as the running back coach. There isn't a lot to say here. It was, workable. It was pretty decent. Eddie Lacy was good in 2013. 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, 35 catches. James Starks was okay as a spellback. 2012, you had Alex Green, gave you about 500 yards. This was a real running back by committee. These 3 guys, Green, Starks, and Benson, their 3 top running backs that year, barely combined for 1,000 yards. So that was definitely not a very good year for the running backs. But 2013, decent bounce back. You actually got good production from Lacy. So that's not too bad. But again, it feels like you missed the best years of this Packers run, because they win the Super Bowl in 2010. Aaron Rodgers has maybe the greatest season any quarterback has ever had in 2011, and then you show up right after that. And then you leave before LaFleur shows up and gets Aaron Rodgers back to MVP level, and actually he wins 2 MVPs. So it's just one of those things where it feels like he's just the right guy in the wrong place over and over again. And I don't know if at a certain point maybe you say, well, that says something about him. Seems to me he just needs a break. Before he was in Green Bay, he spent a little bit of time in Tampa Bay as the quarterbacks coach. Let me throw the plural there. 2010, 2011. And very interesting happenstance here. He was there for Josh Freeman. I don't know how many of y'all remember Josh Freeman. 2010, the guy played great. Buccaneers won 10 games this year. I think this was Raheem Morris. 3,400 yards, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Josh Freeman looked like he was going to be a borderline franchise quarterback. He was still very young at this point. Things were looking up. And then 2011, the Buccaneers fall apart, and Josh Freeman becomes the interception king of the NFL pretty much. So development of Josh Freeman failed. So if you want to put that on Van Pelt, I guess you could. But realistically, Freeman was probably just never very good, and this year was kind of a fluke. And then we get to his initial NFL experience as a coach. You have this stint with the Buffalo Bills. He spent 4 years there total. And the most recent year, 2009, is the one that's most interesting to us because he was serving as the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. And as near as I can tell, he was calling plays. It's sometimes hard to find that information 15, 16 years later. But I think he was calling plays. Now, maybe he would rather he wasn't, because Buffalo's offense was dreadful. 16 points per game, 28th in the league. And both quarterbacks that played significantly for that Bills team, Ryan Fitzpatrick and Trent Edwards, had more picks than touchdowns, completed 56 to 60% of their passes, and just generally weren't good. 70 QB rating, 74 QB rating, not the stuff you want. So I don't know if that's a feather in the cap or not, but again, like, you don't have a quarterback in Buffalo. This was during the stretch where Buffalo was one of the worst teams in the league and seemed like they were just stuck in a washing machine of not being able to find competency. So it just seems to me he needs to find a better situation. And before 2009, he was a quarterback coach for 1 year for Trent Edwards. Trent Edwards looked like maybe he was starting to go in a decent direction, but it never panned out. This year, I guess, was kind of decent, actually. 2,700 yards, 11 touchdowns, 65.5 completion, 85.4 QB rating. I mean, that's not bad, especially given it's Trent Edwards. And the 2 years before that, he was the offensive quality control coach in Buffalo, 06-07. Gave you one of the worst offenses in the league in 2007, about 15.8 points per game, 30th. And 2006 was bad, not terrible, 18.8 points per game, 23rd. So it was not really a impressive run there in Buffalo for him. Again, he is just the offensive quality control coach. I don't want to go too far with this, but the only stint where the results were actually good for Van Pelt on this resume would be 2014 to 2016 when he was the quarterback coach for Aaron Rodgers. And let's face it, Aaron Rodgers was great before Van Pelt got there, right? Aaron Rodgers was a Super Bowl MVP and league MVP well before Van Pelt got there. So I guess he's capable of producing good results, but other than that, man, he's just a man at a time. He cannot find a workable situation. He's working with a New England team that had no chance of having a good offense. Like, there was nothing he could do with that personnel. They had no chance. And I don't know. My gut tells me this guy is probably pretty good, and he's the victim of circumstance. But it's hard to defend this resume. There's nothing here that you're really excited about, objectively speaking. Like, maybe 2020 Baker Mayfield playing good football is exciting, but Stefanski was there, right? Maybe these Aaron Rodgers seasons are interesting, but it's Aaron Rodgers. He was great for years before Van Pelt even was coaching the Packers at all. Maybe this one really good season from Josh Freeman is exciting, but then again, the next year, bottom fell out. So he has a lot of experience. Clearly, he's thought highly of because he keeps going upwards in terms of responsibility and rank. But this is kind of the issue you run into, right? If you want somebody with play calling experience, sometimes you end up going with a guy who doesn't have good play calling experience. The good play callers get head coaching jobs. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think.